Hello and welcome. I'm Noni Radebe, a broadcaster, a storyteller, and someone who cares deeply about African communities and the people in them. I spend a lot of my time just thinking about what it means to grow up on this continent, to build a life here, to raise children here. And one thing I keep coming back to is this. So many of the things that we take for granted, or things that we dream of being able to take for granted, come down to whether the basics work, whether the lights come on, whether the roads hold, and whether the water runs. Today, I want to talk about water. Specifically, I want to talk about the cities across Africa where water is not guaranteed, where families wake up every morning not knowing if today will be the day that the tap runs dry. And I want to talk about what it actually takes to change that. So my guest today is Mr. Peter Macy. He's the founder and president of ROCKBlue, which is an organization that spent over a decade working inside water utilities across Africa. They've been strengthening the institutions that keep water flowing for more than 21 million people. He left a successful private sector career back in 2013 because he believed that the sector was getting it all wrong. And he built something different. Peter, welcome. And thank you for making time for this conversation. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thanks, Noni, for having me and for engaging in this dialogue about ROCKBlue and the challenges of water and sanitation in the global south and particularly in Africa. So I really appreciate you having me. Happy to answer your questions.
Sure. I really appreciate you making the time as well. And I think for our listeners, what makes this conversation a little bit more different is that I'm not coming from the water sector. I'm actually coming from communities because I grew up in South Africa. I've seen what it means when services fail people. So I'm going to be asking questions that I think people within these communities would actually want answered. So let's start at the very beginning. I mentioned earlier that you left a very successful private sector career in 2013 to start ROCKBlue. This is not a small decision. What happened? How did you get there?
That's a good question. I would say the first seeds were planted when I grew up as a young boy in the Ivory Coast.
Sure.
So back in the early 1960s, I was in the Ivory Coast, and there I saw a completely different culture than the culture in the United States, in North America. And so it was really just absorbing a different culture, totally enjoying that different culture, and just seeing the differences. But then some of the differences were quite stark because there was the rich and the poor. And those were the sort of the first inclinations of understanding that there is that great disparity between rich and poor.
Yeah.
But then let's fast forward. I would say the next seed that was planted was when I became a Peace Corps volunteer.
Sure.
So there were advertisements on the television I can vividly remember about Peace Corps volunteers living in villages, walking barefoot, living in a thatched roof house, going to the bathroom outside.
Yeah.
And then them calling it the toughest job you'll ever love.
Sure.
And I thought to myself, that's what I want to do. I really like that idea.
Wow.
So from that moment forward, it was always planted in my mind, I want to be a Peace Corps volunteer. I want to work in Africa. I want to work in this kind of environment with these cultures. Then I became a Peace Corps volunteer, and this is where I really saw the disparity between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots, and where the first images of what it was like for people to suffer from lack of water and sanitation. So I can vividly remember a mother and her child on the steps of a clinic, and the child was suffering terribly from dysentery and meningitis. I mean, really suffering, and the pain on the mother's face. And then coming back probably a few minutes later, and the child had passed away.
Oh,
and so, there's no getting that image out of your mind. And knowing that, geez, we can do something about this. We don't have to let the women and children and others suffer. So I would say that was the next seed that was planted. And then really fast forward to 2013, I'm floating down a river in Africa, and I hear this news that we're navigating a rover on Mars.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so they're talking about, we're navigating this rover on Mars, and it's costing us X billions of dollars to do it, and we've invested all this time in it. And I'm thinking, really? And at the same time, we've got billions of people on Earth who don't have access to water and sanitation, and they're suffering similar to that woman, that child who I can recall in the Central African Republic.
Sure.
I said, this can't be. We cannot accept this. We have to come up with a plan to bring water to all the people that don't have it, which is in the billions. And so I said to myself, we can't keep doing what we've been doing all along.
Yeah.
We have to do something radically different, because if we continue at this pace, then we're going to still see billions of people without water and sanitation. So that was the genesis. That was the moment that I came up with ROCKBlue and this completely different approach towards helping people get access to water and sanitation.
Sure.
And I realized that it was never about technology. It was never about money. There's plenty of tech out there. There's plenty of money out there. But it really boils down to people and institutions. And if we can find the right people and create the right institutional environment, then we can solve this problem. So that was really the genesis.
Sure. Takes real conviction, but also real life experience. And also, I think to just walk away from something so comfortable, because you see people in need and you see something that needs doing, that's a bold move. So yeah, I think our listeners will also be able to relate to this feeling, even if it is on a different scale. So when people think about the water crisis, the image that comes to mind is often rural. It's often women walking miles to collect water. But you're so focused on cities, Peter. Why cities?
That's a really good question. So I spent a lot of my career working in the rural area, and I love the rural area. But when I thought about 2 billion people not having access to water and 3.5 billion not having access to adequate sanitation, I said to myself, if you really want to make a big impact, you're going to have to go to the cities. That's where the people are. That's where the migration is.
Yeah.
They're going to the cities. So I said, okay, you've got to work in the cities. Also, the cities is where the population growth is the fastest. So the population growth in cities in the global south is on the order of 3 to 5%. Whereas in the global north, it's 0 to 2%. Okay, so we're getting a lot of rapid infiltration in the city. So we have to work in the cities. That was my determination. And also the cities, not only are people migrating to the cities, but when they migrate to the cities, you're finding these informal settlements. And you and I have both seen in South Africa these informal settlements and inadequate services in those informal settlements. So what happens? When people don't have adequate water and sanitation, they get sick, and unfortunately, some will die. So anyway, the decision was to go into the cities. And also the cities is where we see the most amount of deteriorating infrastructure.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a larger percentage of the infrastructure that's deteriorating in the cities versus the rural areas. And obviously that infrastructure is also more expensive. So this is why I wanted to work in the cities.
Sure.
But then the next decision was, how do we do that? All right. Because everything we've done in the past is not moving the needle in the right direction. Okay. So how do we do this? So what I did and my co-founders did is we spent 2 years investigating the successes and failures in the sector.
Sure.
And unfortunately, the failures far outnumbered the successes. But when we looked at the successes, there was sort of a common thread. It was through proper leadership.
Wow.
So it wasn't on the tech side. It wasn't on the finance side. It wasn't really even on the political side. It was on the leadership side of the organizations. And for the organizations to want to run, utilities like a business, not like a charity, but like a business. And so that's what we said. We said, this is what we have to do. We have to work with utilities and municipalities in the cities. We have to work with their senior management teams. So this is not at the tech level. This is at the leadership, management, financial level. Mm-hmm. And we have to get them to encourage them to operate more like a business.
Yeah.
So this is why we chose the cities and the way we chose it. But I want to, if you don't mind, I want to add one other thing.
Yes, please.
Is that oftentimes people will come in from the north and they'll be complaining about these public utilities, and they'll be complaining about the individuals.
Yeah.
And they'll be saying, you're doing this wrong, you're not doing this right, you're making all these mistakes, you're not reporting correctly, whatever. There's a lot of criticism. Criticism comes in from the experts that come from the global north. Maybe it comes in from politicians. Maybe it comes in from regulators, maybe the press. Okay?
Yeah.
But what no one understands, or they don't understand well enough, is that the utilities and municipalities in the global south face what we call the 19 challenges. Let me explain that.
Yes, please.
So, Noni, let's say you're a successful utility manager in London or in New York or in Munich. You're doing a great job. Everyone likes you. Everyone's got water. You're not being bugged by the press or the minister or anything. You're doing just a fantastic job. Everyone's got water. But now I take you, Noni, and I put you in Nairobi, or I put you in Dar es Salaam. Ooh. And guess what? Now you have 19 challenges you didn't have before, okay? Like lack of access to finance. Maybe you have load shedding.
Yeah.
Maybe the internet is not so good. Insurance is not great. Maybe the pool of people that you have accessible to you is less.
Yeah.
But yet, I'm going to tell you, you have to do the same thing in Nairobi that you did in London.
Context.
You need to get water to everybody. But now you say, but I have these 19 challenges. How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons why ROCKBlue set up, is we said, that's not fair. That's not fair to tell these public officials that they have to do the same amount of work. They have to provide the same services as we do in the global north, but with these 19 challenges.
Yeah.
So we're there to help them level the playing field. I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense. It really does. You know, Peter, when you describe that, I think about areas I know right here in South Africa, and just across the continent, where people have just normalized not having water. They've built their whole day and life around uncertainty, and that problem has just become routine for them. And I think what strikes me is that when we talk about it as a water problem, but it's really a life problem, is it not?
It is, because imagine. Well, I'm gonna share with you, a story about a woman in, I believe this is in Lusaka, Zambia. So she's there. Right now she's got a healthy lifestyle, but now the taps are no longer running. Okay, for whatever reason, the taps are no longer running. And because of that, she's been forced to get water from either a local contaminated stream or a shallow well. And that's the only thing the only place she can go to get water. And now she's giving that water to her child. And her child is getting sick. Okay. Also, this woman has her own business. Yeah. She's selling vegetables. She has to wash the vegetables. So here's why water is, this is a microcosm. So this woman and the child and the family, they're dealing with someone who's very, very sick now, okay? And the amount of time it takes that woman to deal with the sick child and the loss of her wages because of that, just the unproductive time, it really, the poor quality water is affecting families, affecting real people. And not only their health, and God forbid someone dies because of this, and many do, but also the economy of the family. Yeah. Think about it. She can't be making money while she's tending to the child. She can't be making money if she's attending to the burial of the child. So it's impacting her economy. And then you scale that up So now it's impacting the economy of the community. It
Yeah.
impacts the economy of the country. And I'm just giving you the example of one woman who I can think of. Now you multiply this by millions, billions of people. And so, yeah, water impacts all parts of life.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioning that if you think about it in that way, you multiply this one woman by hundreds of thousands of people in a single city, you actually start to understand why the work that you do matters at a completely different scale.
That's a good point. So I probably forgot to mention that earlier on when I started up ROCKBlue, I didn't want to have a small contribution. I wanted to be a huge contribution.
Nice.
And so we may have started small, but we want to be big because we're talking billions. Okay. So for example, let's give some context. You said, what does this mean when you multiply this one woman, this one child upwards to the rest of the globe? Every year, about 1.4 million people die because of the lack of safe water and sanitation. That's heartbreaking when you can just imagine one person, and now you have to multiply it by 1.4 million people. And then get this. And now, again, I'm thinking about this child I saw in the Central African Republic who was suffering from dysentery and meningitis. 400,000 children under the age of 5 are dying every year.
Sure.
And then I come back to us navigating a rover on Mars. Come on, we can solve this, and we have to solve this. Also, there's the whole issue of women and girls who are spending over 200 million hours every day collecting water, and countless more caring for their families that are suffering from these waterborne diseases. We can't accept that.
Yeah.
And so our premise was, who's supplying water to these young women and children? And that is the utilities, municipalities, and the cities. So that's why we're focused on the cities and these service providers.
Sure. All right. So Peter, water organizations have existed for a very long time. And we know that development funding has flowed into Africa itself for decades. So what exactly has been missing? What is it that hasn't been working?
What's not been working? So what's not been working is the fact that too often when there's a need of a utility for external support, that support is temporary. It comes in for a short period of time. Maybe it's a year, 2 years, 5 years, at most 10 years. And then that support leaves. Oftentimes also that support is not integrated into the functionality and the people of that utility. It's like siloed.
Yeah.
So that's one of the main problems. The other one is that the focus is always on the money and the infrastructure and never on the people.
Yeah.
Or rarely on the people.
Sure.
And rarely on the systems, because also people come and go. So if you're investing in somebody who in 5 years is going to leave, then you've got a problem. So you have to invest in the systems as well. So the system will work even with different individuals. But the main problem is this.
Yeah.
Is that we come in and we do our work and we leave. And so what happens then, you come back 5 or 10 years later, and you hardly see any vestige of that investment of that time. And if I have time, I'll give you just a quick example. So I was visiting a project in northern Tanzania, and they had just received money for both a reservoir and a treatment plant and a pipeline. And they had received that money about 2 years ago. The project was completed about 2 years ago. And when I pitched up at the water treatment plant and talked to the operator there was no water flowing. This is 2 years ago. And I said, how come there's no water flowing? You have this brand new treatment plant, pipeline, and so on. He said, yeah, well, we had a problem with the spare part. Something broke down. This is a microcosm. This is not an unusual case. And so one of the problems is we look for short-term solutions. But we can't afford to have to come back and do things twice. There's not enough money and the demand is too great. So this is a huge problem. The fact that we work on these short-term interventions and then we come back later and there's no vestige of that investment. And so it's not only costly and we don't have the money, but it's also an issue of hope and demoralization. So when the people in a community, they receive this new water supply source and then 2 years later it's not functioning, they lose hope.
Yeah.
They don't want to do anything because they've lost that hope. So to me, that's I would say that the largest problem is associated with not coming up with long-term solutions, focusing in on infrastructure and not capacity, and not focusing enough on systems. Yeah.
Sure. So naturally, knowing these problems, then you'd want to do something different, right? So what is it that your team does or your people do differently on the ground?
So this comes back to that process in 2013. Like, okay, we've seen so many failures. What is working?
Yeah.
And so again, I'll repeat, what is working is good leadership, good management, and having a business sense. But also having a long-term approach and not a short-term approach. So what we do, which is different, is we only work with the senior management teams of these utilities and not further down the rung, not on the technical side, just on the management side. So leadership, planning, finance, we only work at that level. But the other thing is we had to tell ourselves, and I told myself, I'm not going to leave the private sector if what I do is not durable. I'll just stay in the private sector.
Yeah.
Okay. So I said, I'm only going to do this if whatever we do, whatever investments I make and we make is going to be durable, then I'll do it. So we had to make a promise to our partners, and this is a bold promise.
Sure.
A lot of people probably thought this was stupid. We said, we'll be with you as long as you want us. So it's not a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. We'll be here as long as you want us.
Sure.
And that was very difficult because, like, how do you fund that?
Bold.
Yeah. How do you tell them I'm going to be here forever for you?
Yeah.
So then we had to come up with a very unique model to be able to afford that. And the model is, one, we had to build up a cadre of specialists, global specialists who know how to work with the management teams of utilities who are willing to give back.
Oh, nice.
Volunteer and give back to these utilities. So we built up this cadre. I think it's now about 150 people.
Sure.
Okay. And they're willing to help out. Next is, you can imagine if we're working with the utilities, there would be a lot of flights, hotels, per diems. We can't afford that. If we're making this lifetime promise to the utilities, we can't afford all that. So what we try and do is almost everything is done virtually.
Oh, beautiful.
Now, it's not easy. I mean, you and I are talking, we're not talking virtually. We're across from each other.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's not entirely easy, but it is a lot less expensive and it allows us to make this promise. So what we have is we have a local link between the virtual assistants and the utilities that we work with. So we do have a physical local link to help us out with that. So we've been able to reduce our costs significantly. And the impact that we have is tremendous for the cost that it takes to run ROCKBlue and to provide services in this way.
Of course.
I would say the other thing, Noni, is we understand those 19 challenges.
Yeah.
We understand how unfair that is to these public officials. And we also understand how hard they work to try and overcome those challenges and get water and sanitation to their communities. So we enter these relationships with them with a lot of humility, incredible amount of respect for them. And I think I'm pretty sure they get that. And this is the reason why we work very closely with them. And they share with us probably the most intimate areas of their work that probably others do not have access to because they trust us. And in a way, we're their cheerleaders, because think about this. If you're a utility manager, everyone's complaining.
Yeah, all the time.
Customers are complaining, your minister, your president, your regulator, your press. your development partners, they're all complaining.
Yeah.
But ROCKBlue is their cheerleader. So it's also being a cheerleader for these, wonderful human beings who are dealing with the 19 challenges to help get water and sanitation out to their community.
Sure. I love that. And what keeps popping up in my mind is this idea of working hand in hand, but then this notion of walk with us, and that's ROCKBlue together with, these utility managers, etc. And that just says so much, because I think in many development spaces, there's still a dynamic of, the expert arriving from outside, telling people what to do, and then leaving, which is what you mentioned and alluded to earlier on. And then communities are just left worse off sometimes. You've literally said that as well, because it just creates a sense of dependency over and above, like you mentioned, a loss of hope, rather than capability.
They definitely want us to walk with them. They definitely want us to understand their challenges and to work with them. And they've told me, when we do sort of our annual surveys of how we're doing with the utilities, they say, you are giving us hope.
Oh.
But they come to us first and they say, how do I deal with this? I'm being pressured by a minister. I'm being pressured by the regulator. I'm being pressured by another development partner. I'm being pressured because of leakage in the pipes. They come to us first and we care about them. And so we do walk with them. But you brought up a really interesting thing about that dependency. Okay, so two things which are really important for us. We operate in the background, so they're the front and center. Don't be touting us and saying we did this and we did that. It's you all.
Sure.
So we encourage them to take credit for anything that we're doing together. And the other thing is, on that dependency, they could develop a dependency on us, but remember, we're very careful. We operate virtually. We also only give X amount of hours a month for free. And if they need more, fine, they can outsource that. But we don't want that dependency. No one is dependent upon us. They're dependent upon themselves.
Okay.
And we're just there as an assistant to them, helping them overcome those 19 challenges.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then, Peter, I was wondering, as you are mentioning all that goes into managing a utility, what does it actually look like? What does it look like before ROCKBlue comes in? And then what changes after in practice?
You ask a really good question. And I don't want to take credit for any of the changes that largely are because of the utility. We're a partner, okay? But the majority of the changes, the after look, is because of the utilities themselves. But you ask, what does it look like when we first come on board with these utilities? It looks like a bunch of people fighting fires, dealing with a leakage here, dealing with an angry politician there, a regulator, a development partner, a multilateral development bank who says, I need this report tomorrow, a commercial bank who says, I need some numbers from you that look positive this particular month. So they're always putting out fires. And they're never able to be proactive. They're in a crisis cycle, what we call the downward spiral. And in that downward spiral, not only are services becoming less and less stable, but people are paying less and less for their services. So their customers are not paying their bills. And it's just this complete downward spiral. Also, there's very poor reporting. There's very poor collection of data and analyzing data, and very poor accountability.
Sure.
But again, I don't want to make this sound as if these individuals are incompetent. They are not. They're just dealing with some major challenges. And you asked about the differences. So what do we see that's different after we engage? And again, I just want to remind you, Noni, that we don't take credit for all this.
Yeah.
We're just one of the players. But here's some of the differences that we see. We help them to break that cycle, that downward cycle, and then to get them on what we call the virtuous cycle upward of improved performance. Over time, the leadership team begins to regain that control that they need.
Nice.
And they become more proactive. They start using data to understand what is happening across the utility. And they establish their priorities. So they don't focus on the little things, but they focus on the priorities. And one way we get them to do that is at the start of every year, they fill out a form that represents their top 3 to 5 priorities just for the year. And we focus on that form together with them throughout the body of the year. So that form says, here's where I am today with my finances. Here's where I want to be at the end of the year. What are my quick wins?
Wow.
And how do I navigate to get to that goal? So we help them on that.
Sure.
And so for the first time in years, they can lift their eyes from, the day-to-day emergencies, and they can actually start planning.
Wow.
That is when the real transformation occurs with the utility. Instead of merely surviving, the utility starts improving. Service expands and service improves. Revenue improves. Water losses decline. The staff will start to gain confidence. And this is one of the wonderful things to see is when that staff gains confidence.
Yeah.
And because of that, they're actually willing to push back on those that are coming in to say, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. Then when the staff has the confidence and they're pushing back and say, go away, I've got this.
Yeah.
Okay. But it also translates not only into better services, but expanded services. And one example I'll give you is in Lilongwe, Malawi, that translated into water service reaching more than 173,000 people, additional people. And not because they built the infrastructure, but because that institution became stronger and they were able to do things like this.
Yeah.
This is the power of helping a utility move from a crisis management to, I would call it, purposeful management.
Of course. But 173,000 people, that's a city within a city in itself. And I think that number is staggering when you just connect it back to that individual story behind it, or the individual stories behind it.
And think about it, Noni, we had that vision of what it's like for people to move into the informal settlements that don't have that access to water and sanitation. Okay, now they do.
Yeah.
But one of the things I'm most proud about is the ROCKBlue team that has been working with our utilities since 2016.
Sure.
Those utilities have expanded service to 1.8 million people.
Wow.
So now 1.8 million people more have access to water and sanitation.
How powerful.
And again, I want to repeat, that's not us. We're only there to help. But that's the utilities who are expanding service to more people. And this means healthier people.
Walk with us.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
And you just mentioned the 10-year growth, in the people that the utilities are able to service. That's absolutely phenomenal. Okay, Peter. So ROCKBlue works across multiple countries. How do those utilities actually connect to each other? Is there a community of practice that's been forming?
Good question. So typically what we see is that utilities operate, unfortunately, in silos. Just the utility itself, okay, not with other utilities. Now we're starting to see sort of a north-south utility cooperation.
Oh, wow.
So you'll get people from North America or Europe who are collaborating with utilities. That has its limitations in terms of effectiveness. What we prefer is south-south collaboration.
Okay.
So utilities in Africa are interacting with utilities in Africa.
Is this because of context? Sorry.
It's context, it's understanding the culture, having common problems and solving them together, okay? So one of the things that we do is we get all of our utility partners in Africa together on a quarterly basis to both report on how well they're doing on their goals for the year, but also to engage with each other. Like, how did you solve this? Well, here's how I solved it. And there's a lot of that back and forth amongst their peers, not with someone from a different culture, from a different context, with all the money in the world and so on. Not someone who doesn't have those 19 challenges, but they're interacting with people that have the same challenges.
Sure.
And we call this our PAWS workshop, Performance Achievement Workshop Series. Again, they get together on a quarterly basis, and they absolutely love this. I would say of all the offerings of ROCKBlue, they love this the most because they're interacting with each other on a quarterly basis and taking pride in their achievements and trying to solve problems together.
So, I mean, there's something really powerful about that in general, like learning from each other, rather than always looking outward for answers, like you were saying, or operating in silos. And I think that is a form of just African solidarity in itself, especially in a professional context. And I think it's underestimated.
I agree with you. And I love seeing them work together. And yeah, just seeing them solve problems together and say, "Hey, I don't need someone from outside. We can do it ourselves." And they oftentimes will hop on a flight and go visit another utility.
Wow.
They'll say, "Okay, you've solved this. Can I come down and see you?" And they'll hop on a flight and go talk to the utility and see it firsthand. So there's a lot of that interaction that goes even without ROCKBlue's assistance. So we may have sparked the idea, but they do a lot of that on their own, and it's wonderful to see. And I think that's where you're going to see more sustainable improvements when it is that South-South collaboration.
Yeah. But I mean, I do want to, just as the listener, as someone from one of these communities on the continent, would like to credit ROCKBlue for sparking those kind of connections. Because I mean, if it weren't for this collaborative approach and for walking with the ROCKBlue, they wouldn't have even met each other. Who knows? Maybe they may have. But yeah, so you're doing great work at ROCKBlue.
Thank you. We'll keep it up.
So there's this phrase that I've seen being connected to ROCKBlue about building investable utilities, Peter. And as someone who's not from the finance world, that phrase actually caught my attention. What does it actually mean? And why does it matter?
It's a great question, because when most people hear about the water crisis, they assume it's a problem of lack of money. It isn't. In reality, there's a great deal of capital looking for good opportunities to improve water services. There are the development banks, there's impact investors, governments, corporations, philanthropic funders. They all do want to invest.
Yeah.
The challenge is that many utilities are not yet investment ready. Sometimes the country itself is not investment ready. And sometimes the investors are going to ask the question, can this utility manage a major investment?
Yeah, of course.
Because sometimes those investments are quite large. So do they have the capacity to manage it? Are the finances understood? Are the risks clear? Is there a credible business case? Will the project deliver the promised outcomes? Can progress be measured and reported? If those questions can't be answered confidently, then the investment community often says, I'm not going to play game.
Yeah.
So that is an issue. That's why we created something at ROCKBlue called Acorn. All right. I'll describe it very briefly. I'll try to. We found more and more the utilities were coming to us saying, I just need access to finance. And we would say to them, yeah, there's plenty of finance out there, but there's a disconnect between the two. And so we formed Acorn to help break down the barriers between what the utilities need and those that have the money. So part of this is helping the utilities to understand their own financial health from their perspective, not from the perspective of a bank that wants to make them a loan, but from their perspective, understand their financial health. Find out where the weaknesses are in their financial health, and then help them understand how you can improve upon those weaknesses in something called a financial performance improvement plan, financial PIP. And then we help them on that financial improvement plan, and then we help them work with investors who want to invest in these projects. Part of it is making those projects investment ready. That's the term used, make them investment ready.
Amazing.
So yes, our Acorn was a relatively new initiative of ROCKBlue, I think formed 3 or 4 years ago. And this helps utilities get access to finance.
And this is brilliant. Acorn sounds amazing. I would like to know, though, if this is something that utilities are asking for. I mean, I imagine some might see it as yet another thing that's being demanded of them from the outside, or...
I would say, remember I told you one of the primary offerings of ROCKBlue that they liked was our workshops.
Yeah.
The other one is finance. The other one is our Acorn. Okay, so we've got a really talented team of people that can help them find access to finance.
Good.
And I mentioned to you that we have this roster of specialists. So more and more, they are seeking those on our roster that have experience in finance.
Yeah.
Utility finance, project financing. So now this is one of the favorite areas for good reason, and one of the areas where we're providing the majority of support to utilities is on the finance side.
So Peter, you've spoken a lot about staying for the long term, about durability. That word keeps coming up. Why is it so central to how ROCKBlue thinks about this work or the work that you do?
Remember when we first started talking, I mentioned all the projects that have failed over time.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to have anything to do with that. So we actually have something you can go onto our website. It's the tenets of durability. We use an acronym to describe it, ROCKS. And we say that if you could take every letter of that acronym and satisfy it, probably what you're working on will be durable.
Wow.
If any of the letters, like the first letter is R for resources, if any of the letters you cannot satisfy, chances are it's not going to be durable. So this is just all about making sure that whatever we do and what others are doing is durable, that it lasts, because we cannot afford to come in and do it twice.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time with our partners with interventions that we feel are going to last over time. Yeah.
Sure. And I think that speaks to something much deeper as well. It speaks to respect, and also speaks to actually believing in the capacity of the people that you're working with to actually sustain change if you give them the right support, rather than just treating every engagement as a deliverable and moving on. Powerful.
Thank you.
So Peter, we are almost, at the end of our time together. And I want to finish off on something personal. You've given over a decade of your life to this, and you've carried this financially, personally, emotionally. What still gets you out of bed in the morning?
I think it's worrying about the people that are sick and dying.
Wow.
And it's funny, I find it hard to go on vacation.
Sure.
I find it hard to work on the weekend, play on the weekends. I find it hard to not work at night. And I actually feel guilty because I just think, okay, you're having a good time, but there's people who are dying and getting sick. So what gets me out of bed, and it really keeps me up, is there's too many people suffering, right? And it's just not fair. And we can do better. So I would say it's that. And that's probably why I can be kind of a pain in the butt to my team, because I also sort of push them. You can't go to bed. You can't take a vacation. We've got people that need water and sanitation. We have to do more. We have to be smarter. So yeah, I think that's what drives me.
Sure. I think what moves me most about our conversation today is just the simplicity at the heart of it. Water changes everything, and we all know that, and we all feel it. And yet the work of actually making it happen reliably, consistently, and for millions of people in rapidly growing cities, that is anything but simple. It requires patience, it requires commitment, it requires sacrifice, and exactly the kind of long-term partnership I think that you, Peter, and your team at ROCKBlue have built. So as someone who's grown up on this continent, and as someone who works in communities every day, I do find it genuinely helpful and hopeful that there are organizations doing this work from the inside out and not arriving with answers, but rather walking alongside people, like you said, walk with us until they find their own way. So Peter Macy, it has been an absolute privilege being able to sit and have this conversation with you today.
Noni, thank you so much. It's my honor to have spent some time with you and to share a little bit about ROCKBlue and hopefully get the message out that we can all do better. And we've got to think about the billions of people that don't have access to water and sanitation and get moving and spend more time on that than Mars.
Sure. Beautiful.